Hey guys, so I have a question for you. Have you ever wondered if you or your partner are with the right therapist slash coach? Have you ever wondered, am I getting the right level of care that I need? Am I getting enough care or is my partner getting that? So that's what we're going to talk about today. Welcome to Beyond the Facade podcast. I'm your host, Luke Gordon, and I'm thrilled to have you join me in this space today. What we're going to be doing is diving deep into the trials and triumphs and truths of seeking authenticity. Becoming your true self isn't about a single action or moment. It's a relentless pursuit, a commitment to self that reveals the rich connection and meaning that our life has to offer. So whether this is your first time tuning in or you're a regular listener, know this: what you're building here goes beyond a conversation. You're here to challenge, to change, and to celebrate the incredible journey of becoming your authentic self. Because when you dare to show up fully, the rewards are immeasurable. So welcome to Beyond the Facade. Let's get started. I'm excited to have Gary back. I don't know what I did to convince Gary to come back here. Some kind of mind trickery. I don't know what happened, but Gary, thanks for coming back. I appreciate you a lot being here. I know there was a lot of good feedback from the last podcast you did with me. I know it's a different subject today, but yeah, thanks for coming back.
Yeah, it was not a Jedi mind trick. It was just enjoying you, to be honest. I really like talking to you, and I really appreciate the framework of this podcast about taking off masks.
Yeah, it's an important one. It's funny because I was talking to somebody the other day, and they're like, "How much editing do you do on your podcast?" I'm like, "We can't do a lot because if I do a lot of editing, it's literally called Beyond the Facade." So kind of like what happened with Gary and I, it's going to be what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. All right. So here's what we're going to talk about. Okay. Kind of set it up already, but do you find yourself wondering now, am I with the right therapist? Am I with the right coach? And is it going according to speed? And specifically, 40% of our listeners are the betrayed partner, are the partner in healing. So that's a big question for them. We're spending a lot of money and we spend it with the right people. I'll speak for myself and then Gary, you for me. I'm big on not advocating that Choose Recovery Service has to be the fit. We just want the you guys to get the best person possible and make sure it's the safest for you.
Yeah. I would say the same thing, probably differently, but it's the same exact thing. I want each person to get what works best for them, every client. And so sometimes that's us, sometimes that's not us. We're all, I think, just like you guys, we're all here to be vessels to help people heal. And if we're the ones that can help this person heal, great. And if we're not, I'd like to help you find a better match or a better fit.
Do you help people find a better fit, Gary?
Yeah, depending on how they've reached out to me, depending on how much of a sense I have of their needs, yeah, I'll try to help them find a better fit. And maybe that's worth us talking about. What is the right fit?
Yeah, let's start there. Yeah, what's on your mind?
I think it's an important question for anyone seeking therapy for anything. How do I know if I'm with a good therapist? What should I be looking for? And I think it's even more true with what the population that your practice and my practice really works a lot with, which is people who are who are probably coming in a lot of pain in a crisis moment, maybe the biggest crisis of their life, of either having discovered something and going through betrayal trauma, or having been discovered in some type of secret sexual behaviors and feeling immense shame. What, to me, I would suggest for people to look at is, first of all, what does it feel like? Like when you're with this therapist, what does it feel like? Do you feel that they are connecting with you, listening with you? Do they seem to know what they're talking about? Because you can't, if it's a new experience for you, you're in a learning curve, but do you feel like they have awareness and knowledge of what they're talking about? And also, I think, do they extend hope without selling it? I want to come to someone to feel better. They don't have to promise me the moon, but by how they relate to me, are they present with me? And do they have experiences that they're doing and helping people through what I'm going through? That will extend me hope. It's not the words so much. And then I think the final thing, and that this is not a clinical thing, but it is like the ultimate clinical thing, which is, are they normal? Can I relate to them?
Yeah.
There's a lot of weird therapists. You might have to edit that, I don't know, but there are a lot of strange therapists.
It's not coming out.
And there's people that might say that about me, but can I relate to this person as a person? Yeah, they're a therapist. And this is so hard to say to someone who's coming in as a betrayed partner, but like what, because you may not trust anymore, but what's your gut telling you about this person?
Right on. Spot on. Yeah, it's interesting because I know I'm not everybody's cup of tea. There are some people that they're not going to want my style. They're not going to like my style. And that's okay. That's totally appropriate. So I love what you're talking about there, and that balance between, I feel heard and understood by that professional. Like they're understanding me, and they're not just putting me into some box with a bunch of other people. And I feel like I'm seen and heard. But that all part where they can challenge me in a way where I feel like I'm still valued and cared about, but there's a real challenging there going on. And I think that's really important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. For people coming in our neck of the field, neck of the woods, in our niche with betrayal trauma and sex addiction and secret sexual behaviors, I want to know, are they competent? Are they comfortable talking about these things? Are they able to hold my pain, my hurt, my anger, my shame?
Mm-hmm.
Are they able to feel compassion towards me, whatever side of the relationship I'm on, whether I've been betrayed or I've done it? Can they hold me in a compassionate stance, not a judgmental stance? And I think other things that I would want to think about is lots of therapists advertise they deal with trauma. And if you deal with people, you deal with trauma. Lots of therapists advertise that they deal with sex or sex addiction. And so I want to know, do they really, or is that like a marketing thing? And you can't really ask that question in that way, but I want to get a sense, whether it's from reading on their website or just talking to them, do they understand what I'm going through? Do they know how to work with it? Because I would say that working with sex addiction is very different in many ways than working with substance abuse and alcoholism. So addiction, but there's things that are often missed and nuanced. And also I think generally the personality types are different on that side. And trauma is trauma, but betrayal trauma has everyone's trauma is different, but it has common themes that run it, like I'm not enough for my partner, that wound, me as a sexual being, my belief in us as a couple or a family. That's another level of the betrayal trauma. The isolation of the betrayed partner, that they don't want to tell people in case they're staying. They don't want to be judged, and they also don't want to break the ties to their friends and family with their partner. So like their sense of isolation, community, therapeutic, family, and religious values that may go into causing them to feel shamed, or messaging that they get. There's just the lack of trust for their partner, but also the lack of trust for themselves. How did I miss this? Or if I did see things, why didn't I speak up earlier? Like the betrayal blindness. So there's so many really nuanced and important things that someone should know about. They can help all those like crevices of the betrayal trauma wound, or as Bill Marmonwala would call them, like the different rooms in the hospital. It's really important, I think. And so just knowing trauma isn't going to necessarily help the therapist to really directly address some of the things that someone who's aware of the betrayal trauma wounds would address. And I think the other thing is that the wounds from betrayal trauma, the symptoms of them last for a long time. First of all, they last longer than you want them to. But I typically see like the person's nervous system can take 18 to 24 months, sometimes faster, sometimes longer, but to kind of really start to settle down. And so a therapist has to have that knowledge. And also because when they feel like they're not helping the client, they start trying all these different things. And if they start to feel incompetent, if they're not able to help the betrayed partner fast enough, because all they want to do, every therapist just wants to help you feel better, of course. But you have to have the ability to sit in the space of, I can't just wave my wand and make them feel better, even though I wish I could. And it feels like I'm not an effective therapist. I'm not going to start making all these other diagnoses and suggestions when I'm still dealing with the length of betrayal trauma.
I like that a lot. Let's going back to the part, not all therapists, like if you got somebody that specializes in sexual addiction or sexual compulsive behavior versus substance abuse, that's not the same training. What's good questions for me? Is it appropriate for me to ask the therapist what their credentials are? How would I even navigate that? How do I know?
Yeah, I think it's appropriate to ask. This is a person you're going to spend a lot of emotional time with, a lot of time with, a lot of emotion, and a lot of money with. So it is important to ask them. There are certifications and trainings that are more well known than others, whether it's the CSAT, certified sex addiction therapist, or certified partner betrayal therapist, or APSAT. There's definitely organizations and credentials that are known, but there is also other people who are trained in these two areas that don't have them, but you want to ask them if maybe like, how do they approach it? What do they do? The other thing I think that's important is that, and this is hard to know, is that you want to get a sense of, this is again a gut measurement. Has this person done their own work? Because if you're a betrayed partner and you're in the early stages, there is a world of therapists and coaches out there who haven't fully done their work. And I don't think I've fully done my work just in full disclosure. I don't know what that would look like, but where they're still angry. For the therapist hasn't worked through certain things yet. And so their stuff is going to come in the way of their ability to treat you. And that's always true. Every therapist is trained in transference and countertransference, and they have to do that. But in this field, even more, if they've come, and there's a high percentage of therapists, myself included, who've come to the work in this field because of our own personal journeys and recovery and stuff. So you want to make sure that if your vibe is this person, like, is really, if you listen to them on podcasts or you listen to their interviews with them or you read their writings, they can be very supportive to you as a betrayed partner. But if they're rallying you to be angrier, that's not where you want to be. Your anger should be validated 100%. Your hurt, really, anger is really about the hurt, should be seen and validated and worked with. But there is a type of therapist and coach in this field that's their primary thing. And that's helpful for a few months, maybe, to be in touch with your hurt and anger, especially if your strategy is to like sweep it under the carpet. But ultimately, that's not going to bring you long lasting healing for yourself. And if you're choosing to stay in your relationship.
I really like that. There was a few things that we wrote down around signs that you might therapist. And one of them was you're stuck in endless venting.
Yeah.
You're just like there, and that's what the sessions consist of. And you're like, I kind of feel like I'm just stuck there. And I was like, okay, let me think about me and my journey with my own therapist. Stuck in endless venting. Would I be able to see that? I'd be able to see my stuck in endless venting. And I think I would, because it would start to become repetitive. Like
Right.
start to
Anyway, the tricky thing with betrayal trauma, though, is that especially if they're isolated because they don't have a supportive community or family, or they're scared to tell people, they do need a place to vent. They do need to come into therapy and be able to say whatever and have I think one of the key roles of a therapist in early recovery with betrayal trauma is to validate the experience.
So one of the things that I wanted to do is I wanted to back up and say, wait, hold on. What I'm referring to is the individual seeking recovery, the compulsive behavior person, venting, which is like that part of being stuck in that, of me being in session. Because I recognize with the betrayed partner, that's a different healing part.
Yeah.
The level of accountability. I'm not saying as individual seeking recovery is a compulsive behavior that there's not a spot to share emotion, but the accountability happens pretty quick. It's a different wound.
Yeah. And so if I'm in therapy and I find myself venting about my spouse a lot, like if I get a man or woman who's coming in because of their compulsive sexual behaviors and they're venting in therapy most of the time about their spouse, I'm like, what are we doing here? That person's not in the room. So if I find myself that a therapist is letting me, I'm coming in to recover and heal and from an addiction or some kind of problematic sexual behavior, and my therapist is letting me go on and on about how I'm upset about what my partner said, you can't heal who's not in the room. And the foundation of all healing and recovery, whether it's 12-step recovery or therapy recovery, whatever word we use, like the umbrella of recovery, is about healing starts with me. As long as I'm doing this, I'm not looking at me. Doesn't mean I can't ever I shouldn't talk about my experiences in my relationship, because that's revelatory on how I process and things and take in information and interact. But no one ever got, it's like talk radio. Like no one ever changed their opinion who wasn't in the show, and no one's ever been healed if they're not the person in the room.
We're going to take a quick break for a moment. I want to let you know of some things that we have coming up at Choose Recovery Services. Okay, so I'm very excited to tell you about the Unmasked Intensive we have coming up in May. It's May 13th through the 16th in Spanish Fork, Utah. The name of the intensive is Unmasked Paths to Authentic Masculinity. Let me tell you some of the things we're going to accomplish. We're going to explore some root causes, like at the end of the day, what's underneath this behavior? What's the why behind it? What's the insights into understanding why my behavior existed, the one that kept me in secrecy and hiding? We're going to embrace vulnerability. So we're going to confront a lot of the struggles of that non-judgmental space so you can foster more authentic connections with the people that you love. We're going to realign with your values. We're going to learn new coping strategies, and we're going to forge some authentic connection. We're going to build a lot of camaraderie to hear that happens. I wanted to share with you what previous participants have said about this transformation. So here's what one guy said. I'm just going to read it to you. I loved the connection with those around me. It was eye-opening to learn how to open up and show love for myself and be okay with what's going on inside of me, no matter how hard or ugly I may see it. I specifically remember this man saying this and just being astounded by like, wow, if I'm around people that really open up, what can I explore and learn about myself in this intensive? He found it to be really eye-opening. So anyway, for more information and reserve your spot, go ahead and visit our website and we'll provide some information for you. And then take the time to invest in yourself so you can start to lean in a more authentic way in your life. Looking forward to seeing you there. Let's get back to our episode. I wanted to do some more differentiation of, Gary, can you clarify talking about the individual seeking recovery versus the partner in healing when it comes to that, like you're talking about with that? Can you, because I'm picturing the betrayed partner listening to that and going, okay, Gary, you asking me to like not be able to talk about my partner and the hurt that they've caused?
Yeah. That's not what I'm saying.
And I know that.
If I'm coming, a betrayed partner is in a different category with this stuff, I think, because they're trying to sift out what's real and what's not, what's true and what's not. They are reeling from harm from a partner. So they need to be able to get some reality checks from someone who understands and can help them see what's going on and teach them to be able to know what's true and not true for themselves in their relationship. Because the words don't matter, because that's where the violations were, right? That's where the harm was done, through talking and lying. So it is important to be able to talk about it. And they do need a space, like I said before, to vent or to process or to like, is this normal? Is this not normal? Because they may have had a history, often they have a history of making themselves small to their partner, you know?
Yeah, I love that.
Yeah.
The part, can you speak to, Gary, can you speak to the betrayed partner, the partner in healing, their journey of really sitting back and watching them work with their partner, work with the therapist and going, I really hope they're with the right person, and they might not be with the right person, and what might be useful for them here if they're working with the right person?
Yeah, that's a great question, Luke. I want to back up for a second about seeking the right therapist. Another thing I think that will be helpful for people on both sides of this equation is when you feel your therapist is competent, they're going to be sensitive to the needs of you, their client, whether you're the betrayed partner or the person who did the betrayal, and what your needs are. But because they know how to help you and they know this field, they're going to drive the therapy to where it should go. It's not going to be driven by the betrayed partner's pain. And that can sound bad, and I don't mean to minimize the betrayed partner's pain at all. But when betrayed partners are in pain, they're seeking relief, understandably, safety and relief to feel better. And so they're like, oh, I heard this is good. I heard this is good. I heard this is good. And if we just run to each different treatment, they're going to be jumping treatments. And they're not going to stay in it long enough. So both for themselves and their partner, it's not to feel dismissed by a therapist. I'm not saying that. And don't ignore your gut. But you want to find a therapist who can I would hope in a humble way, say, I know what I'm doing. Here's why I would suggest this for you. I know that this looks shiny and bright, this therapy model or this book, and they can all be helpful. But if we're going to jump around to all these things, and if we're going to bring, I'm going to make a joke here, but if we're going to bring TikTok therapy comments into our thing, and that's going to drive what should be explored, and I'm willing to explain to you the value of this thing or not the value, but I, I want to explain to you how I think would be most helpful to you. Right. So they're able to hear your concerns or your fears or your desire to try different things, or shouldn't we be doing this and we're not doing enough, but they're also showing you why they're guiding it gently and lovingly towards a certain way. It's really important. I've had an experience in this field, I think we all have, where sometimes a betrayed partner is in such acute pain and symptoms, and they want relief as fast as possible. If it's not happening quick enough, they start thinking like, what do I need to do to feel better? So sometimes the answer in their brain is, I need to read more about what happened to me, or I need to listen to more podcasts, or I need to do more therapy. And I'm going to join 3 different therapy groups, and I'm going to go to 4 different therapists. And some of what I've seen at times is that a betrayed partner, they're going in their desire to feel better faster, which is normal. It's a healthy response actually, but sometimes there's no faster, and that's hard to hear. And so it's like, I want to feel better and I want to feel safer. So let me read more and understand more. The more I understand, then the safer I can be and better I can feel. Or the more work I do, the more therapists I have, the more groups I'm in, the more intensives I do, then I can feel better and be safer too. That's sometimes people's brains show up those in that way. They also might show up in like, the more work my partner does, then I'll feel safe. So let me get him or her into 5 different groups and 3 different therapies, and we should do all these different things. And I need to make sure they read the right books, listen to the right podcasts. Anybody who knows what I'm talking about, just nod. Right? I think everybody's been there on both of those sides. And sometimes that connection, while that's a safety-seeking attempt, it can derail progress or impede it or slow it down. Because if I'm jumping from one program to another or therapist to another, because this will be better, or I heard from my girlfriend in this Facebook group for betrayal that this is a really good thing, I'm not staying with one process. I'm going to have to start again over here and again over here. There's no magic process. There's no therapist. There's no book. There's no podcast that's going to just make it all better. Unfortunately, I wish there was. So I just caution, if you don't feel your therapist is helping, talk to them.
Yeah.
Or if you don't think you're healing fast enough, tell them.
That is so important. That is a part of the healing journey, specifically for the individual seeking recovery, to be able to advocate for yourself. What about the betrayed partner? Can they ask questions to their partners?
So I didn't answer your question. Yeah. Thank you for bringing us back, for bringing me back. Yeah. So sometimes where that fear of I need to feel better is, I can only feel better if my partner's getting helped. Because as long as they might not be getting helped enough, then I'm in danger. So how can I feel better? So I'm going to shift my focus onto my partner and to their process, make sure that it's good. And that has a whole spectrum of like, I mean, I've seen it all. I've seen it from, I'm going to ask my partner how their therapy was as a general question, to I'm going to listen into my partner's therapy without permission. Like it runs the whole gamut of safety seeking behaviors, all understandable, but not always so effective. So it's certainly okay to ask your partner what they're working on in therapy. In fact, my opinion would be is I would have a conversation, hopefully, if they're not already doing it, to ask your partner they should initiate the sharing.
Absolutely.
Hey, let me tell you what we talked about today in therapy. And that doesn't mean that they don't get privacy and confidentiality with the therapist or their group or their meeting or their sponsor. But here's what's going on with me emotionally and broad things. Here's something I heard in a meeting that really resonated with and made me think about myself. So I would really work with somebody on that side of the relationship to initiate the sharing with their partner, because that also is messaging like, I'm thinking about you. I'm in the initiation of those conversations by the person who's working on their recovery to the betrayed partner, messages to the betrayed partner, I'm thinking, you're on my mind. And so that's one of the signs of like, oh, my nervous system can start to relax.
And think about that. You think about the 4 aspects of a healing relationship. Vulnerability that exists when I show up to my partner and say, hey, I'd love to share with you about some of my ahas in group today. That's vulnerable. And the reason it's vulnerable is it's risk, because what if my partner says, yeah, they get triggered based upon that. That's hard to hear because that brings up memories. You got humility, which is it takes a lot of humility for somebody to show up and share that stuff with them. You got transparency, which is that's what's going on inside of me. So there are many key aspects. But yeah, I think it can really draw us back into some unhealthy relational dynamics when if for the partner that's in healing, going and saying, hey, tell me about what happened in group. And all the love goes in the world to like, well, geez, I won't get anything unless I ask. So yeah, speaking more to the individual seeking recovery that drive that process.
I think another thing that has happened, depending on the history of the couple, is that if there's been dishonesty in couples therapy previously, or if the person who's now been discovered and has had secrets has been in therapy but been lying to their therapist, so their partner is going to naturally feel scared. How do I know they're not lying to their therapist? Or if it's my spouse is charming and wraps the therapist around their finger, all that stuff, which is very valid concern. So they get concerned. Are they wasting their time because they're not being honest with their therapist, or they're being charming and charmed with their therapist? And so I've had those dynamics too. And what I often do early in the process is suggest just extend an invitation that if my client who has, let's say they're the one with the secret behaviors and has been discovered, that maybe they want to consider bringing their partner and their spouse into a session once to meet me. Because they probably have heard about me through, oh, you're seeing this person. And so there's so much riding on this relationship and this healing. If it can help their partner lower their nervous system and feel a little safer, if they can see that I'm competent, which hopefully I am most of the time, and if they can also see that I'm not snowed by their partner and that I can be tough on them. It doesn't mean I am like performative tough, but that I'm direct and that how I see things, and that I also talk about the experience of betrayal in front of both of them to their partner, then they're like, oh, I have someone who gets what I went through. And then it feels like my spouse's time and effort in therapy is going to be more effective.
Okay. Yeah. I think it'd be useful to spend a little more time on the pros and cons of my partner meeting my therapist. I think there's
I didn't say the cons, I said the pros.
I know, yeah. And I think we just have to look at the risk and the reward here, and also recognizes the professional's ability to be able to handle that, because they have to be pretty skilled at their job to help create safety for both people at the same time. Right?
So I would process it first with my client. If we were going to invite, let's say I'm seeing John, who got discovered. If I raise it, I'm going to process what would it feel like for him to have his wife come into the session. So I'm going to process that with him before. I'm also going to check in to see if there's anything he's told me that she doesn't know. I'm also going to let him know I'm not going to lie or keep secrets. It's not up for me to just divulge information, but if she would ask me a question and he hadn't yet shared something with her, I'm not going to lie. I'm going to probably direct her to ask him.
Yeah.
So I want to be clear with them, and I also want to know what they need, what do they need to feel safe. And I'm not trying to impose this on them. If they're interested in it, then I would do that. And then when I bring the partner, then when the partner does come to the session, I usually start by welcoming them and checking in how they're feeling being with us, because they're a guest in someone else's therapy. So the first thing I want to do is make the guest comfortable and process what that's like. Does she feel like an outsider? What could I do to make her comfortable? It must be, also somehow align with her, let her know I understand she's probably in a lot of pain and going through a horrific experience. And that usually really opens things up in a lot of wherever it goes to. But then I usually would also ask my client, So what's it like having her here? I just want to check in on you too. This is our space. It's been your space. And you took this leap to bring her in and for the reasons that we've talked about, but how are you feeling? So that just those two parts of that conversation are often very helpful for the couple. They feel connected during that. And then it also usually gives enough material plus things I know that are going on that then it guides where to go in the session. Sometimes they have specific questions. The one thing I don't want, and I tell them, I usually will say this before even we do it, is I don't want a dynamic where it's like mom is coming to check up on the little boy in his therapy.
Mhm. Mhm.
That's not good for anyone. It doesn't feel good. And so I make that clear. That's not the goal of this. Like, it's for you to come and tell me all of his bad things. I let the person before we even bring their spouse in, I let them know that's not what I want to do. I don't want to have that conversation. Sometimes they need to share something and that's fine, but I don't want to make this a session where they're being checked on by their spouse to see if they're really being honest and do they tell me everything and because that just feels diminishing and punitive. And I'd rather, if those issues are existing, figure out a different way to address them than that.
Yeah, and that's why, like, pros and cons, like, I believe if you speak to in generalities, that there's so many benefits for the partner being able to be seen by their partner's professional. And for the people that are seeking recovery, it's scary for them, but they also want it to a level too. They want to be able to learn how to be open with their partner. And that's an excellent space to be able to navigate some conversations that are hard to do on yourself. And that, I'm not talking about couples counseling. I'm just
No.
talking about a joint session between those two
Correct.
people. And
Correct.
so there's a lot of trust that can be built during that. And but there's also some really basic things that can be shared during that. Like one of the things that'll happen when I get a chance to meet my client's partner is be able to set the stage for what healing looks like from you show up in a session and that client hopefully breaks through levels of denial and shares stuff with me that they just feel like the world can't handle. And then there's going to be a period of time where they move through that to where they get to a place to be able to share that with their partner. You allow there to be somewhat of reality that's really uncomfortable. And you talk about that. And then also what the environment will consist of and what to expect. And it can be a really rewarding conversation for them, but it's hard. So
Yeah. And I also think sometimes that session can also be used as talking to them together about what does the roadmap look like?
mhm.
If they're in couples therapy, they'll probably hopefully get that by a couples therapist. What does it look like for them as a couple? But a betrayed partner may want to know, what does my partner's recovery roadmap look like? What does their healing look like? Because that will help me know how safe I am too. So I want to like map that out and also answer questions.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So Gary, maybe one of the closing questions I have here is how do I measure whether my partner's with the right person or not? How can I know?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. First of all, I think it's important to realize that they are never going to heal or recover fast enough. Fast enough would be that it should have never happened. But even now that it has happened, there's usually a tremendous learning curve for both people in the relationship. They've both lost their attachment person. How do you deal with that? They both are navigating a situation that they've probably never been in before in some ways. So it's all new. And so for the person who has been discovered and they've lost their, even though they were cheating whatever way on their partner, that still was their attachment person. Also, they're often, if their behaviors are like an attachment object, like they use the behaviors as another way to feel okay. So they've lost both if they've stopped. So you've got a number of things that have to happen to bring the person up to speed. And during this time, your life and relationship is going on and you're having to coexist. So they've got to learn, they've got to like break through denial, which depending on where the person's at could already be done, or it could take a while, or multiple layers of denial, which is usually the case, right? They've got to learn how to get more in touch with their feelings, become what I would call emotionally literate. also for many men specifically and some women, but it's a new experience. So when they're asked how they're feeling, it's not tired or good or fine, but it's more than that. They have to then learn how to have the courage or the guts to share their feelings when it might upset their partner, which is a huge learning curve. If they've been secretive or dishonest all or most of their life, they have to learn how to be honest. What do you mean you have to learn how to be honest? They have to learn how to be honest. Their brain has developed the ability to compartmentalize things. And often, like we say, like denial, don't even know I am lying. Like they don't even know they're being dishonest. So these are all just beginning things. They also have to learn, as they learn, become emotionally literate, they have to be able to handle, and I don't think many people, especially men, can do this, their spouse being upset or in pain. Men are, as a way to get away from their own discomfort with feelings and because of masculinity, they have a hard time tolerating other people's feelings too. So many men can maybe tolerate them if their spouse is having feelings about someone else, like, "Oh, my mother's driving me crazy," or "my girlfriend or the kids are upsetting me." They can be there a little and whatever way they're able to show up. But when the pain is coming as mirrored back from something you yourself did, and that kicks up shame, most men, in my opinion, and this was the hardest thing for me in any recovery, was to learn how to tolerate the feelings of shame and not then react out of shame, which comes out for me and other people, defensiveness or shutting down. Some people would storm out of the room. Some people would get bigger. That's the biggest learning curve. So all those things are happening. It's like a super steep learning curve at the beginning. It takes a while and it's messy. It's messy. So what I would say to a betrayed partner is they're not going to, I've heard the phrase, I'm sure you have too, Luke, they're just not getting it. They don't get it. Like it's going to take a while to get it. That's the truth. Like all those things are stages and it's not fair. It's not fair to the betrayed partner that it doesn't just happen overnight. Even if you go to spend a ton of money and do an inpatient program for 45 days, they come back, they still have a huge learning curve too, especially now that they're interacting. That's where all the learning is. So that's why I think it's so important for the betrayed partner to get support during this time, because they're both going to make what I think are probably, hopefully they get to a place where they're both making best efforts with where they're at. And that's still not good sometimes, good enough. And so it's going to take a while of messiness and hurt and a lot of mishaps. What happens often when, let's say, when just the partner conversations is at first the person is defensive, angry, lies back, argues back. You did this also, like that. Then they learn to not do that. Then they learn to not defend. Then they learn to listen. But when they listen, they're basically like a robot. So they just sit there in a non-emotive way listening, because they've learned that if I argue back or if I say something, it's probably the wrong thing. So they get quiet, but their partner doesn't feel connected. Then they learn to say something back and connect, but it's not yet fully heartfelt. It's not fully empathetic. So then it still feels falling short. These are all phases along the lines of healing for the person who's trying to learn it. But in the meantime, the betrayed partner is still spinning out over here of it, like bleeding out and in pain. So it's really messy. That's why I think that in this process of finding therapy, to get both people in the individual therapy, I'm a big believer in this area of therapy, group therapy, for different reasons, but similar also. You need more support than a 1-hour session a week just to navigate. Yeah. And you're
Absolutely.
functioning at a diminished capacity. You're going through trauma. You're in current trauma as a betrayed partner, and you're maybe taking care of kids or a job, plus a relationship, live your life, run a household, all these things. You're functioning at a diminished capacity emotionally, energetically, intellectually. People need extra support.
Yeah. That's so good. So there's a few things that I've taken from a conversation with you today, Gary. I think finding the right fit, it's not always easy to begin with, but once you're there, feeling safe, feeling supported, feeling challenged. But if you're scared to like and open up, like just, it's okay to ask questions, to seek to understand why for yourself or for your partner when they're with the right person. And then the change takes a really long time. And just zoom out, take a look at it, and then trust your intuition, trust those senses, because that's gonna be a big part of the process.
Yeah.
Yeah. Hey, Gary, where do people find you? Tell us where to find you.
I'm in my office at home. They can find me at intimacyrecovery.com is our website. We're the Center for Intimacy. And also people can email me directly with their questions about what we're talking about or other things. I hope to always be able to get to them. And my email is my name, Gary Katz, GaryKatz at intimacyrecovery.com.
Very cool. Thank you for spending time with us today, Gary. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks again, Luke. I want to do a third time if I can come back. I would love to.
Of course. I would love that. And based upon feedback, other people would too. Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Your body holds on to so much of the trauma that you've experienced, even if you've tried so hard in your mind to let go of it. Because trauma isn't just a memory, it is stored deep within you. And that true healing means going beyond just talking about it, which is why I am so excited about the up and coming Body Awakened Brain Spotting Intensive. There are a few spots left. I would love to have you join me. It's small, it's intimate, where you will experience deep body-centered healing through brain spotting, powerful somatic exercises, and connection in a supportive community that sees you, that holds space for you, and that can help you reclaim what was taken. This isn't just about healing, it's about transformation. It's about reconnecting to your body and releasing what no longer serves you and stepping more into that empowered, whole version of you. This is what I love helping my clients attain, and doing it in a very intensified way can be really powerful. April 10th through 12th, click the show notes for Brain Spotting Intensive, but it's not just about brain spotting. We're doing so many experiences with the body to connect back to the body. I cannot wait. Come join me. Let's awaken your body and release the trauma and start reclaiming safety and reclaiming you.
Hi, my name is Hallie Roderick with Choose Recovery Services. And if you're a woman healing from betrayal trauma and you find yourself feeling stuck or experiencing overwhelming triggers, having a difficult time trusting yourself, or even thinking about trusting others, or having a hard time understanding what healthy boundaries are, how to hold those, I want to invite you to consider joining us at our upcoming Courage to Thrive Intensive, held on April 23rd through 26th in Spanish Fork, Utah. These intensives are one of my favorite things to be a part of because healing happens in community. There's just something different that happens when you're in person with other women who maybe your stories aren't exactly the same, but there's a mutual understanding and a safety that is created by being in a common community. So if this sounds like something that would be beneficial to you, please check the show notes, reach out to our office to get more information, and come see us in Utah on April 23rd through 26th. We'd love to have you join us.
Hey, thanks for joining us today. If this is something that you connected with, I'd love to meet with you more and talk about it. So what you can do is go to chooserecoveryservices.com or check the show notes. And there what we can do is set up a quick conversation to meet. Thanks so much for listening to Beyond the Facade, where we unmask the authentic self.